One of the things that was presented in the first healthcare working group meeting is that in all of these states that have expanded Medicaid, they've had virtually no movement and improvement in health outcomes.
Jonathan, of course, you guys know, is with OCPA. He's president of OCPA. OCPA is Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs. I had to stop and think what it was. I get it. And they are amazing assets to grassroots in Oklahoma with the work that they do regarding things like school choice, Medicaid expansion, taxes. They really work hard to make sure that what's best for all Oklahomans is what's done. They, of course, are a conservative think tank. And Jonathan has been president now for what, about 3 or 4 years now, right? And but he's been with them for quite a while. He's been with them as long as I've been associated with them, I believe. And they do phenomenal work. They've got a gala in October. That's coming. Is it October? It's their Liberty Gala. I would encourage you, if you haven't gotten tickets, to get tickets, because it's always a great event. You see some wonderful people and you get to hear a phenomenal speaker. And so if you want to talk a little bit about that too, Jonathan, you can, but come on up and join us and let us know what you got.
Thank you, Erna.
And that's not for projection, that's for
Perfect.
projection.
So I have a loud mouth, so he'll probably have to turn the volume down. Thank you guys for allowing OCPA to share today. Later, I've got a couple of my colleagues that were caught a little bit behind the rain. They are bringing the items I'm going to talk about today. So if you're wondering, hey, he's got that in his hand, I'd like to see that. A copy is coming for you. So what I'd like to do is go quickly. That way we have time for you guys to ask lots of questions. There's 3 or 4 things I want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about them quickly and then want to take lots of questions. So the number one thing that the left is trying to accomplish right now is a massive expansion of welfare in Oklahoma. I think it's definitely important that we want to defend the Second Amendment, and we want to defend people's ability to carry a weapon how they see fit. We all know that we're much safer when good guys also can defend themselves, and not just bad people have the ability to prey upon us. So it would be good if we can stop that from going on the ballot. But if it goes on the ballot, it's going to pass. But what the left is trying to do is they're trying to entrap about 628,000 Oklahomans, able-bodied adults, in Medicaid. So a couple of stats that are really important for why Medicaid expansion is the wrong thing for Oklahoma. So first of all, remember, no matter what anyone tells you about Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, remember, Obamacare was based on a lie. That's right. Yeah. 37 times the president said, if you like your plan, you can keep your plan. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Even the liberal media had to admit that it was the lie of the year when he said it. So if the president of the United States has to lie 37 times on public record, and the liberal media admits he lied, it's probably a safe bet that you can't trust anything that anybody tells you that would be positive about the future of that law. A couple of things about Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. So remember, the federal government is broke, despite what anyone may tell you. We're spending a deficit. Our deficit's probably about $800 billion or so. So every dollar in Medicaid expansion spending in any state that hasn't expanded Medicaid, it is not free federal dollars. It's dollars on the backs of us, our children, and our grandchildren, and our future, and it makes us more dependent on foreign countries. A couple other things that you're not going to hear them talking about. So when you look at all the states that have expanded Medicaid, they projected that about 7 million people were going to enroll. They've had almost 16 million. So that means their estimates were off 110%. A statistic that's even worse for Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is costing 157% more than what the costs were projected for states that had projected it. To give you an idea of how large 628,000 able-bodied adults is, we would need to build more than 7 OU football stadiums to house everyone that would be eligible for that new welfare entitlement program. Here's a fascinating thing that's not being talked about, and that will come out as this campaign goes on. So right now on Medicaid, you have the aged, blind, disabled, pregnant women, and children. Pregnant women and children are up to about 200% of the federal poverty level. There's a few caveats that are in there. But it's essentially the most needy among us. Now, I'm not going to have a conversation today about whether or not Medicaid is the right way to try to care for the most vulnerable. That's a conversation for a different day. But what's most important is that the people that are on Medicaid right now, for the most part, are people who have an argument that it's more difficult for them to work. This new expansion is purely to 628,000 able-bodied adults, and it would enshrine in the Constitution a constitutional right to welfare. So think about that. Right now, the left is trying to repeal the ability for you to carry a weapon the way you see fit responsibly. But they're literally going to take money from, you guys remember Barack Obama? Well, you remember when Barack Obama came on the scene, he worked with a group called Acorn. You remember that? Well, you remember Acorn was corrupt. They've had to go away. Remember, though, the #1 union that was supporting Barack Obama was the SEIU, the Service Employees International Union. They're investing millions of dollars to force at the ballot Medicaid expansion because in 13 red states, those states have said, that's not the right thing for us. We don't want to expand welfare. So the SEIU is going to spend millions of dollars in Oklahoma. George Soros is going to spend money in Oklahoma to get a constitutional right to welfare for able-bodied adults who should be working. Hundreds of thousands of them already have health care provided by their employer through their insurance, but that's going to have to be paid for by you. So you're going to hear, well, it's 90-10 money and it's going to be a great match, and how could we not pass this up? Do you know how much 10% of the cost of covering health insurance for 628,000 able-bodied adults is? Your 10%, us as taxpayers, would be $374 million a year.
Oh, wow. I thought it was like
No, that's what they're telling you. So what they're doing right now, they're doing what the left did with pensions, what they've done with so many other programs, is they sell a program to the public with a bogus cost, a completely lowballed estimate. They get people enrolled in a program, then they come back to you and shake you down as taxpayers later. The number that they're using is a debunked number that was used several years ago to try to trick Oklahomans to expand Medicaid. Fortunately, Oklahoma's legislative leadership has regularly decided that it's the wrong thing to do. The previous governor regularly tried to force the legislature to expand Obamacare's Medicaid expansion. Fortunately, Senator Dom and others always led the fight against that. Our current governor is awesome on this issue. He's adamantly opposed to any form of Medicaid expansion. But you need to be informing your friends about what a massive problem that will be for the budget. Already in Oklahoma, 26% of Oklahomans are on Medicaid. We've got about 4 million people that live in Oklahoma, and in any given year, we've got about 1.1 million people already who are getting taxpayer-funded free welfare. So you're going to hear, oh, we could come up with an Oklahoma plan. We'll come up with something unique that encourages people to work. Don't believe it. It's all a lie. And all these other states where they tried to come up with these unique plans, often it's very difficult to force people to work. And here's the other thing to think about. The way the Affordable Care Act is written, it is written that a state, if they're going to participate, that they have to run a traditional Medicaid expansion, which says in the Medicaid law, you can't charge someone a copay. So even though I'm a perfectly functioning adult who can walk and work, if I sign into this program, you can't have payment as a barrier to entry for me to get care. So guess what's going to happen under, for example, Kamala Harris if she gets elected as president, or Elizabeth Warren, or Joe Biden? Do you think Joe Biden is going to let Oklahoma keep its waiver for work requirements on its new Medicaid expansion? The Obama administration didn't. The Obama administration gutted Insure Oklahoma, which had a work requirement, because they said that people should have a constitutional right to health care. You also need to remember, Medicaid expansion, that's the left's first step into a single-payer healthcare system. Everyone forgets how the conversation of Obamacare started. Remember, it started with the Democrats saying we want a single-payer healthcare system. We want everybody to be in Medicare for all. When they first had control, when Obama was president and the Democrats had both the House and the Senate, remember, they wanted everybody in Medicaid. There was so much backlash from that, they backed down to, okay, well, we're going to put everyone in Medicaid under a certain percent of the federal poverty level, and then everyone else will get their insurance from either their employer or on the exchange. So when our staff gets here, we've got a great one-sheeter that tells why we don't need to expand Medicaid. So you're going to hear people say, well, what about the rural hospitals? And what about cost shift? So I want to talk to you about hospitals. If we would drive down 71st, that direction, and then make a right-hand turn, you would drive by poor old St. Francis Hospital, who's broke, who is lobbying hard to force you to pay $374 million a year for taxes. So I have to pull open my phone because I've got to tell you what St. Francis's mission statement is. Because what they have talked about is that there's people that are poor and who need health care. By the way, there's a great article. Now, the left wrote this article because they want to try to force people to do Medicaid expansion. Did you know that hospitals have sued 25,000 patients in Oklahoma because they couldn't pay their overpriced hospital bills? Did you know that? Nonprofits who don't have to pay any taxes, who get great tax benefits at your expense. So here is the mission statement of St. Francis Hospital. I'm reading from their 990. It's really important for you to hear this. To extend the presence and healing ministry of Christ in all we do. That's their mission statement. Over a 4-year period, St. Francis net revenues over net expenses was $642 million. Their net assets increased from $1.6 billion to $2 billion. Their CEO, whose name I will keep silent to protect, well, his name. It's not innocent, but his name. Makes $2.2 million a year. Do you think St. Francis needs any more of your money to provide care for the poor and powerless who need it? If you go look at St. John's, they have a similar mission statement. If you look at Mercy Hospital, they have a similar mission statement. If you go look at Integris, they have a similar mission statement. They're all about bringing the health and care of Jesus Christ, which you guys know me, I'm a strong believer. And they're making billions of dollars doing it, but they want to shake you down to help more people. So if you just take a moment, if you could reflect on Scripture for me, and how many of you remember those verses where Jesus said to someone who asked him for help, you know, food and drink and money I do not have, but if you turn to Caesar, he has a great program with which you can get reimbursed for the care that you need. You know, you guys know that didn't happen. So I encourage you to start talking with your friends about that. So you're going to hear that, oh, Oklahomans support it, that the polling is on their side. Actually, it's not. When you just provide Oklahomans just a few facts about Medicaid expansion, not even leaning our way, right now, Medicaid expansion, 43% of Oklahomans support it, 42% oppose. And they haven't had several months of OCPA telling them about how much their taxes are going to go up, about how much their hospital prices are going to go up. Another important point, you're going to hear this whole bogus thing about cost shift. I encourage you to try to come to OCPA's Liberty Gala October 3rd. We have a doctor, his name is Dr. Martin McCary. Guy is outstanding. There's actually a TV show that's based off of his life or his experience. He has a book called The Price We Pay, and he talks about how government intervention has massively distorted both the price and quality of healthcare for Americans. So I encourage you to go look at some of what OCPA has written about hospital pricing schemes, the fact that, think about this, we all were able to come in here and find out what it cost for whatever we wanted to buy. I hear all the time, Jonathan, you don't understand. Healthcare is really complicated. We can't tell people what it costs before they purchase it. So this week, I went to go speak at an event on constitutional reform. It was in Baton Rouge. You don't really care where it was. But so I drove, for a number of reasons, I drove to Dallas and then flew. So what's fascinating is I had to get into a metal tube with a stick on each side of it and some kind of combustion something on each side of it that had to stay suspended in air for about an hour and 5 minutes to get me from Dallas to Baton Rouge. This thing was about $31 million. So don't you think if we can figure out what it costs to propel me in a metal tube at about 31,000 feet so I don't crash and die, that we can figure out what it costs to provide you some sort of medical care before you need it? There's a great doctor, libertarian doctor you should know about. He's on OCPA's board, Dr. Keith Smith. He's been doing a lot to expose really the criminality that's going on and the collusion between hospitals and insurance companies.
Tell me about your daughter. How much did you pay when she had her tonsils?
Yes, great story. Thank you for reminding me. She's going to make me really mad, and this is what gets me spirited. So, long story short, I have another story. Our family was a victim of ObamaCare. If you like your plan, you can keep your plan. You like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Well, because of the onerous rules of ObamaCare, it basically shut down what was known as the child-only market in Oklahoma. You used to be able to buy policies for children that were 0 to 18. Another long story short, children are relatively healthy, so they're fairly cheap risk for insurance companies. The most difficult year for a child generally is from birth to 1. If they survive that period, odds are they're invincible until about 18 when they can drive and drink and all that stuff. And then they become really dangerous. But so anyway, all I did was I called OU Hospital. Remember, I don't have health insurance anymore thanks to Barack Obama. So the guy that was supposed to bring hope and change to children that looked like him, my children are biracial, they now don't have health insurance thanks to Barack Obama. So I called the government hospital, OU, and I said, look, I got a daughter. I'm sorry. She's disobedient. She climbed up the ladder after we told her not to. She's 3 years old. She fell, and she's holding her arm. So we think it's probably broken. I said, well, what does it cost to fix a broken arm? Remember, this is OU Children's Hospital. They're the premier children's hospital in the state of Oklahoma. They have a trauma 3 center there. They treat all kinds of crazy, wild things. This is a simple break from a disobedient child. They said, well, we're going to have to look at her because we don't know. So I go there. So they're acting like it's a massive emergency that's going to take great evaluation. And I said, well, but the doctor I used to have is now there. And he charged us just $85 for Jasmine's broken toe when she was 18 months. So surely you guys have a price. Surely Savannah Small is not the first 3-year-old in the history of Oklahoma to come into OU Children's Hospital and have a fracture. Well, sir, you don't understand. We've got to evaluate it. So Savannah's in a really critical spot. After we sat in the waiting room for over 3 hours, remember, she's in critical condition, though. We got about 10 minutes of care, We never actually saw the doctor. That's some great nurses and a PA. I left and I said, so I'm asking for the 5th time today, what is the price? Well, sir, we don't know. We can't tell you that. About 2 weeks later, I got a bill for $1,200 for about 15 minutes of care. On the phone, as you can imagine, now I am a believer, but I did have a less than Christ-like moment on the phone. And so channeling Jesus, clearing the tables in the temple, I asked in a very stern way, how on earth is it that you had no idea that it was going to be $1,200 before I walked in and now it's $1,200? Well, sir, we did this and we did that and we did this. I said, we never even saw the doctor. And well, but sir, we assure you that the doctor looked at the digital print while you were there. And I was like, so the doctor was able to look at that in those 10 minutes, right? And they said, well, it's $1,200. I said, well, I don't have $1,200. Remember that guy you guys like, Barack Obama? Well, he took my health insurance away. And she said, oh, you don't have health insurance? And she said, well, we're going to cut the price for you to $350, which is still a ripoff when you think about 15 minutes of care. And the rest of it will be written off as uncompensated care. That $1,200 price was for your insurance company if you had one. So she realized that she told the wrong person that. And I said, well, ma'am, who pays insurance premiums? And there was silence on the phone. And I said, here, I'll answer it for you because I think you know the answer. You just don't want to say it because you know it's a recorded line. We do as customers and patients. And she said, sir, how could I help you take payment? I don't think I could really continue any more conversations with you. So that gives you an example of what a joke the healthcare pricing system is. That's what Dr. McCary is going to talk about. He's going to talk about medical providers across the country who set up screenings for our most vulnerable in the Medicaid and Medicare population that they don't need because they know the government is an easy payer. You're hearing a lot about the opioid issue. Opioid deaths, the death rate from opioid abuse is twice the rate in Medicaid expansion states than it is non-Medicaid expansion states. You know why? Because when you're on Medicaid, you get your prescriptions for free with no copays. So that gives you some idea about the scam that is being promoted to Oklahomans, and we're confident that as we educate people, they'll be able to see it's the wrong thing. I want to mention one more thing, then we need to open questions. The left is really mad that their ideas are so crazy that they can't build consensus across the country. So now they have made one of the most genius things that the Founding Fathers ever created about the person that they hate the most on planet Earth right now, which is Donald Trump. Right now, liberals want San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Philadelphia, and New York City to determine forevermore who runs the EPA, who runs the Department of Agriculture, Department of Energy. By the way, all of those things should be abolished. But anyway, we digress. They want liberals to run CMS to provide health care. How do they want to do this? Very simple. The next time somebody tells you that we're a democracy, you should correct them and say, no, we are a republic. Democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what's for lunch. Did you guys get that? So the Founding Fathers were very concerned about centralized power. Long story short, if you have a chance, go read 1 Samuel 8. It is the best political theory ever shown to man. The Founding Fathers read it. It is the account, it's the fascinating account where God has this back and forth with Samuel about what's going to happen to the Israelites who used to live under a republic form of government under God, wherein they had judges that settled disputes, and that was it. Where God has this back and forth with Samuel to tell them what will happen once they get a centralized king with centralized power. What's he tell them? That centralized king with centralized power, he's going to take 10% of your first fruits. Do you recognize what the significance of that was? The king was going to put himself on par with God. Who asked the Israelites for 10%? God did. He was going to take their daughters to be his concubines and serve as his wives. Then he was going to take their sons to ride his chariots and serve in his wars. It's a great political theory document. People ask me all the time, Jonathan, how did, you're African American, how did you become a Republican? What's fascinating, I was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through high school. My parents read me 1 Samuel 8, and then we watched Democrats in Oklahoma City try to eradicate homeschooling. So it became a really easy decision. That and Democrats keep trying to abort blacks at a highly disproportionate rate. So that was a pretty easy decision for us. The Electoral College, you know what the Electoral College does? It's very simple. It says the United States of America is not going to be governed by a popularity contest. It's going to require consensus. Very simple. Each state is allotted electors based on the number of congressmen and the 2 senators that each state has. Here's what the left is mad about. Fascinating story. I think this is correct. It's either 5 or 6. But I believe it's 6 times in the United States of America the president has not won the popular vote. I believe it's in 5 of those 6 times a Republican has won. That's what the left is really mad about. Yep. Their ideas are so extreme, they can't ever win consensus. If you go back to the Civil War, they couldn't win consensus because they had this silly notion that Catholics and Irish and blacks should be slaves. The Whigs and Republicans and others had this novel idea that man was created equal. Today, they can't win because they want single-payer health care. They want to disarm every American. They want people to be able to have abortion on demand. So they would like now there's more than 20 million blacks that have been aborted, most of them at the hands of Planned Parenthood. They would like to see that number at 40 million. They can't get the rest of the country to agree with them on that, so they'd like to change the rules. So what are they doing? They're marching from state to state, trying to get those states to pass resolutions in their legislature that say, we will force our electors to vote for the national popular vote winner, regardless of what our citizens in our state elected. Most people don't realize it, but OCPA is actually home to a project called Save Our States. Trent England from Seattle. He is the premier expert on the Electoral College in the country. We actually stole him from Seattle, much like we stole their basketball team. That's another different story. Trent has helped block efforts to declare those states' electoral votes in 15 states. Fascinating. Because of the work of OCPA and Trent England, we now have determined that if it weren't for OCPA, enough states would have passed this resolution to turn over their electoral votes, and Trump would have lost the electoral vote in the last election. The left is actively working to get 15 states to pass this measure. Trent's actually in Colorado today because Colorado is going to actually send to a people a vote to overturn the legislature. Basically, the legislature, which has been taken over by the left in Colorado, actually went against the will of the people of Colorado and voted to join what's known as the National Popular Vote Compact. It will not surprise you that George Soros' son is one of the lead funders of this project. You guys remember this because 912 Project was very instrumental. You'll remember a few years ago, there was some lobbyists in the Senate that took your lawmakers to, I think it was like, some exotic trip, the Cayman Islands, and they go to Puerto Rico. Yes, they took, yeah. They took them to Puerto Rico, and tried to brainwash them for hours about this silly notion how if we shift to a system where two wolves and a lamb decide what's for lunch, that it'll somehow work out well for conservatives and a biblical worldview. So you need to watch for that. They're trying to do that again next year in the legislature. I don't think they'll get that done. Obviously, this governor would be adamantly opposed to it. But I encourage you to go look up the Save Our States initiative. Sign up on the website. It's fascinating. We've got over 67,000 followers now watching that. It's a national effort of ours. And so happy to take questions on issues, anything.
Okay, I've got a few that I wrote down.
Yes. And you can ask me anything.
In the states that have passed Medicaid expansion, have any been successful?
So that's a great question. So you've heard the governor say we want to be a top 10 state, correct? So fascinating. It is monumental what Governor Stitt is doing to turn upside down the broken bureaucracy of government. That's why you're hearing so much weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth from the center left in Oklahoma about Governor Stitt, because he's actually doing what he promised on the campaign trail. The previous governor didn't do that. The previous governor ran as a conservative and then did just the opposite. The governor, he's actually following through on that. One of the things that was presented in the first healthcare working group meeting is that in all of these states that have expanded Medicaid, they've had virtually no movement and improvement in health outcomes. One of the things they also shared is that, so Oklahoma does rank poorly in health outcomes, but what's fascinating is that we're about the middle of the pack when it comes to healthcare spending adjusted for inflation per capita. Also, the number 1 and 2 reasons why Oklahoma performs poorly in health outcomes, it's not because you taxpayers are greedy little jerks who won't pay enough money for welfare. It is because of behaviors. Unfortunately, and I'm going through this personally in my life right now, so I'm sorry. Unfortunately, the number 1 and 2 indicators of why we perform so poorly in health statistics in Oklahoma is lack of physical activity and obesity. So, just in case you didn't know, having health insurance is not going to help you eat fruit and eggs for breakfast instead of 2 cinnamon rolls, which is what I would like to have. That's a personal responsibility issue. That message was presented to the healthcare working group a couple weeks ago. With the previous governor, there is no way that the health department staff would have come and said, yeah, spending more money is not what's actually going to help make Oklahomans healthier. Fascinating statistic. You're hearing a lot about mental health for Oklahomans. We should all be concerned about that. Most of you probably don't know. There's a lot of research, though, that's pointing to what we eat and poor eating habits actually has a lot to do with mental health and our lack of mental health. Anyway, this person said, guess what? Oklahoma ranks 6th in the country in mental health providers. 6th. Yet we rank about 45th in mental health status. So we have options for people to try to get mental health services. For whatever reason, either our mental health providers are not providing the right care or Oklahomans are not interested in it. Another thing that's also interesting, you see a lot of promotion of states that are really healthy. There's something very important about it. If you notice the top 10 states in health, there's a fascinating thing about them. They all have very easy ways for people to be physically active. So not government created, but it's states like Hawaii and Colorado and Florida and California. Well, it is much easier to walk to places in those places than it is Oklahoma. And so one of the things that Oklahomans are going to have to recognize, we are more rural, we are more spread out, we spend more time in a car than other places, which is fine. So that means we're going to have to make proactive decisions outside of work, what we take in. One of our board members pointed out she's really passionate about energy and environment and conservation from a free market perspective. But essentially, as it relates to somebody's health, at times up to 70% of what's going to affect your health is what you put in your mouth. And then the other 30% is going to be how much you exercise.
Nobody wants to hear about personal responsibility,
Right.
Jonathan.
Personal responsibility is why Oklahomans aren't healthy. Not that you guys are greedy jerks who aren't paying enough taxes so we can expand welfare to 628,000 able-bodied adults.
Does anybody else have any questions? Because I got more. All right. What about Insure Oklahoma? Where is that right now? Is that still in effect, or was that totally gutted?
So the Obama administration massively gutted Insure Oklahoma, and it basically said that any single person essentially has to go on the exchange. So there's a small number of employers that are still utilizing Insure Oklahoma, but Rhonda, she's very wise. You guys should listen to her. She's asking you a question about Insure Oklahoma because it's important. So what's fascinating, of that 628,000 able-bodied adults, around 321,000 of them already are in health insurance. So think about that. They want to give a constitutional right to 321,000 able-bodied adults who already have it. But there's also something else that's important to know. So you remember the ObamaCare exchange. It was horrible. It was proof why government shouldn't be involved in things. They couldn't get a website to work for several months, if everyone remembers that. Well, of the 628,000 able-bodied adults, 60,000 of them are eligible for the exchange. And the income category that's eligible for that exchange basically would have both the health insurance premiums and their copays completely paid for. So these people already have coverage available to them. They're just not going and signing up to get it. Again, an issue of personal responsibility. Again, why should you be strapped with higher taxes because people won't engage personal responsibility? But the second thing that's important right now in Oklahoma, long story short, you've heard Rhonda talk about this. You've heard us talk about this. This is why you should never create public-private partnerships with trusts, especially not in the Constitution. There's a group called TSET. TSET basically controls what happens to about $110 million a year annually. So fascinating thing. You're hearing a lot about rural healthcare and how much we need to invest in rural healthcare, which we think there's free market approaches to fix it. But a fascinating stat. Did you know that TSET, which takes your tobacco settlement dollars, they're not theirs, they're given to the people of Oklahoma, and Oklahomans unwisely voted to let a bureaucrat board that's a trust that essentially is kind of off books, basically gave them the ability to spend the money on anything they want to, including a definition says anything to promote the health and welfare of Oklahomans. We could buy everybody an Xbox in here under that scenario, under that definition. Did you know what they spent to help recruit rural doctors and cover the costs of students who say, hey, I want to be a rural doctor? They spent $651,000 in a 3-year period. Do you know how much they spent subsidizing the Oklahoma City Boathouse? I know you as in Tulsans really think the Oklahoma City Boathouse is a wise use of taxpayer dollars. $750,000. So if we need more rural healthcare providers, why is an entity that controls about $110 million a year spending $750,000 in pork earmarks to a boathouse in Oklahoma City? They spent $722,000 for billboards on I-244 in Tulsa and essentially I-235 in Oklahoma City, which said, hey, Oklahomans, don't drink juice, drink water. Yeah. That's a great use of your taxpayer dollars.
What about the strip club?
Yes, and you forgot to tell me, Rhonda. Sorry, we're going to deviate from an R-rated clip here just for a moment. They spent... It was over $1.1 million over a 3-year period. So instead of covering the cost of tuition for one of our Oklahomans that's the next generation that wants to become a rural healthcare provider, they spent $1.1 million subsidizing bars that ran a campaign that said, don't smoke. So getting drunk is fine, but don't smoke. And we'll give you $1.1 million of Oklahomans' money. So here's a fascinating thing. The next generation works at OCPA. To protect one of those next generation, just in case their parents are watching this video, one of our interns had some free time and went to an establishment where the establishment is a member of TSET's Free the Night program. You should go to our website and see the story about the Free the Night program, because while they were encouraging people and kids not to smoke, they were pushing 14-year-old boys toward drag shows. I kid you not, with the $1.1 million. So here's what's fascinating. Our intern said, yeah, this bar is like a member of Free the Night, and so you can't smoke in the bar. And I said, okay, yeah, I believe that. And he said, so everyone would just go light up out in the parking lot for about 5 to 7 minutes and then go back in the bar afterwards. Does that sound like a wise use of money? So the governor is talking about taking back TSET's power from TSET and giving it to your elected representatives who have to stand for accountability in an election every year.
So, oh, sorry, Nathan. I'm got my list, though.
Yeah, a few things on that. First of all, on the TSET thing, my favorite billboard is the John Wayne one that says, "I don't much like quitters." So they're trying to get people to quit smoking with a John Wayne billboard that says that he doesn't like people that quit.
Yes.
I've yet to figure that out, and I've asked them.
It's reverse psychology.
They can't explain it to me. But since you brought up TSET, and that was a state constitutional question, and Medicaid is looking to be a state question, constitutional. Right. Have you all looked at the statistics on how many state questions have passed that have been constitutional measures? Because I mean, historically, most state questions have failed, and if it's a constitutional amendment, I mean, we had several that have passed over the years, and we've amended things. We had Marcy's Law that passed this last time and different things. But at the Walmart one, I mean, Walmart put so much money into that on the optometrist stuff, and that failed. Yes. I think because it was a constitutional measure, not just statutory. Have you all looked at statistics on that to see what the probability of that might be? So
Senator Dom, you need to listen to him. He's really smart and wise, prophetic. He asked a great question. Here's how crazy the left is in Oklahoma. No state has put Obamacare's Medicaid expansion in the Constitution. So there were 3 states where the Medicaid expansion passed at the ballot, but they were just simple statutory changes. So the left is now mad because those Republican legislatures in those states are now coming and trying to amend those provisions. So also, it's very important, you brought it out. So you're hearing a lot, 57% of Oklahomans support it. We have momentum, it's going to pass. Remember, David Boren and his group, which were going to increase the sales tax 20% and enshrine it in the Constitution, 65% of Oklahomans up until a week or two above in the election kept saying they would vote to put a massive sales tax increase into the Constitution. So don't fall for the scare tactics of the left. Part of the reason Senator Dom's asking this question is part of what they were doing, and this is why we challenged it at the Supreme Court, is they were trying to bluff the legislature into passing Medicaid expansion. They're trying to intimidate them by saying, well, if you guys won't pass Medicaid expansion, here's what we're going to do. We're going to stick it into the Constitution so that it's a noose around you guys' neck forever. And then you'll be responsible to have to come up with the $374 million in tax increases that we need to fund it. And I think once Oklahomans understand that you'd be putting in the Constitution a program that federal bureaucrats would control, they're not going to support it. We've got to do our work to educate them, but they won't support it.
Oh, I agree with that. Why would the Indians be in support of the expansion of Medicaid?
So one of the fascinating things people may not remember, but you remember through, and some of it was partial failings of the history of America. We're not here to discuss that today. But so one of the things that happens in both treaties and federal law is this agreement between tribes and the federal government and the operation of the Indian Health Service. So tribes and the federal government both financially participate in providing free government health care services to Native Americans on their sovereign land. If you're one of the larger tribes that's extracting billions of dollars by Oklahoma out of Oklahoma's economy, essentially tax-free, and you're buying hospitals and healthcare centers, it would be to your advantage to offload Native Americans into a government healthcare welfare system wherein you could go from having to pay a decent sum to help cover the cost of healthcare for your citizens to where you wouldn't have to cover anything, and it's the state's responsibility. That's why many of the tribes support it. You also have to remember, just politically, the tribes have always been strong supporter of the Democrat Party. I mean, when you look at the Creeks and what they're doing and supporting Skyfire and some of these other Democrat consulting firms, and you look at the recent appointment by Chief Hoskins of a very hardcore left partisan Barack Obama administration staffer to be their first delegate to Congress, it's no coincidence that why the tribes are so heavily invested. And right now, healthcare is fleecing people. I should have brought it, and I could have shown you, but when you look at five major health insurers stock prices have increased over 500% since Obamacare passed. It's no coincidence. There's a fascinating study that went and looked at Obamacare's Medicaid expansion and what it found in Colorado. So these hospitals are telling you, we got to expand Medicaid because we have all this cost shift. And if we expand Medicaid, we'll be able to lower prices for everyone else. Well, in these states that have expanded Medicaid, do you know what's happened? Shocker, the hospitals aren't lowering prices. They're still raising them. And shocker, they're not targeting all the money to their rural areas of the state. They're just giving big urban hospitals with cranes and millions of dollars to advertise on TV, more money to poach rural hospitals and get their citizens shipped up to the urban centers. There's three studies, a study from out of Colorado, California's looked at this, and Arizona. Medicaid expansion is happening in all these states, and yet these hospitals are still increasing prices for private health insurance payers and government payers as well, and then companies that have self-insured plans.
Well, don't you find that anytime that the government is paying for something, the prices always go up? Because as long as they're, I mean, just like our education,
Yes.
college is the same way, you know,
Right.
healthcare is the same way. You made a comment that made me write down, I was just kind of curious where in the Constitution it states that healthcare is a right.
Most definitely it's not in the U.S. Constitution, and it is not anywhere in Oklahoma's Constitution. Senator Dom regularly points out for you guys that you hear a lot about education. In Oklahoma's Constitution, even its references to education, they're very limited. It says that the legislature has a responsibility to provide for an educated public, and then it sets, what is it, Senator Dom, like $1 of them is like $1 per student, or for $43 per student in expenditure. So very, very minimal. Nowhere is there a right to health care in the Constitution. That's what liberals are pushing in Oklahoma. They want to force on the ballot you having to cover at $374 million and enshrine in Oklahoma's Constitution. And we know about all of these programs. Senator Dom can tell you, once you get an entitlement program on the books, it is going to be very difficult to ever repeal it. So you're going to hear other senators saying, well, we're going to have a fail-safe provision, and if the government ever yanks the money, it's going to close the program overnight. Garbage. Once they build a constituency, that program is going to be there to stay, and you're going to be required to pay for it. I want to say something real quick about, you were talking about issues in Tulsa, something we're working on that you guys have worked on as well, that we need your help next year. So if you have not seen it, so I encourage you, OCPA now has a full-time Center for Independent Journalism director. His name is Ray Carter. His articles are outstanding. He has an article this week about how 4 school districts are spending more than $200,000 a year hiring lobbyists to come at the Capitol and shake down your lawmakers for more money.
It's for the kids.
It's for the kids, that's right. He's had another great article. So the media would not report about the report that was presented to the legislature a couple weeks ago, that Medicaid expansion is not really improving health outcomes to any degree. But you need to go check out Ray's work. One of the things that he pointed out is what's going on with the unions. The unions in Oklahoma do not support your interests. 60 Oklahoma teachers went to the national convention, and they were the source of the resolution that said this, that every union in America, teachers union in America, should work to push their local school district to close school on election day so that teachers could volunteer on campaigns. That's the kind of far left thing they're doing. They also voted and passed a resolution that supported allowing boys in the girls' bathroom based on their choice. So you talked about what's going on in Tulsa. You know what's going on in Tulsa? According to Tulsa Public Schools numbers, not ours. You take all the kids, all the grades, all the subjects tested in 2017, 70% of the kids weren't proficient in anything. You talk about the minority community, Pastor Philip Abode, who started Crossover Prep. It's an alternative Christian school that's teaching a biblical worldview to young black males instead of what our traditional public school is doing, which is teaching them that they evolved from monkeys. He's teaching them that there's a God that's a creator and that there's a proper way to do things in life. He pointed out from Tulsa Public Schools' own numbers, only 2% of black males were ready to attend college that graduated from Tulsa Public Schools in 2017. That's why there's not enough blacks that are applying for the academy and other four-year degrees because of the abysmal, treasonous, criminal K through 12 public school system that's deserving them. The only way out to help minorities is school choice. That's it. With what the unions are doing, with what the unions are doing, that's the only hope. They need another option. I'll give you an example, and then I'll stop, of how worldview is changing. Fascinating story. So Florida, state of Florida, it's a purple state, always going back and forth in the election. Florida now, and this is what we think should serve as Oklahoma's model. So in Oklahoma, about 90% of kids are going to the government-assigned school. In Florida, 47% of kids are making a choice, and because of school choice programs in Florida, they're able to go to a school other than where they would be assigned. So what we're proposing in Oklahoma is a program is called the Equal Opportunity Scholarship Program, and it is expanding choice to students. I encourage you to encourage your lawmaker. Here's the litmus test for you. So I'm taking my OCPA hat off right now for a moment, and now I'm just a concerned Oklahoman. If your lawmaker is trying to get the endorsement of the OEA, they need to be released to industry and go do something else. If your lawmaker will not support the expansion of school choice, then what they have said is that they support the agenda of the OEA, and they support putting you and your children and your grandchildren and the next generation in danger of the situation where boys would be allowed in the girls' bathrooms. Because that's the agenda that the OEA is pushing. That and abortion on demand and taking your right to bear arms. Those are the things that the unions are pushing. So with that, happy to take any other questions, and I know you guys.
Does anybody
gotta get
have
going.
anything else that they want to? They do some phenomenal research and stuff, and on the school choice and in fighting for that, and that's one of the things we've really got to get together with them. And then, of course, fighting this Medicaid expansion is going to be so important. It's going to take a concerned effort. But I tell you what, just with people knowing that it will go into the state constitution, and that the only thing that changes that's going to be able to make a change is another vote of the people, that's going to be huge, because I think that's how what was it last year that was, or the penny sales tax.
Right.
You know, because he's right. Everybody was like, oh, it's going to pass. It's going to pass. It's only a penny, you know, and it's like, but it's a penny on every
Exactly
dollar.
right.
It's actually 1%.
Right.
It's not just a penny, but it's a penny. So it would. So once they found out that that would go into the state constitution, I think that was a huge selling point in getting people to oppose it.
The other thing you can do is encourage your lawmaker not to cave. Tell them don't fall for the bluff.
You hear that, Nathan?
And tell them don't. You need to tell ones other than him, because he gets it. But you need to tell your state representative and senators, don't fall for their game. This is just merely a stunt for them to try to bluff the legislature into passing what they know is not going to pass at the ballot.
Well, and that's what we're seeing, though, Jonathan.
Right.
We're seeing that now when they can't get the legislature to do what they want, because we do have a supermajority, not that they always vote that way, but I think that these are the intimidation tactics
Right.
that they're using on the legislature. So if we're going to do business this way, we don't need a legislature. We just need to run initiative petitions and get people to sign
Right.
and vote on it. And so that's what they're essentially saying, is that we don't respect, you know, what they're doing or not doing, and so we're going to do it ourselves. And hey, look, we're the same way. I mean, if there's something out there that we want, we're going to get out there and do the same thing. But this is the way the left is trying to intimidate our legislature into acting in ways that are not beneficial to us.
Right. And they know this is not going to pass. That's why they're doing this, because they want to scare the legislature into passing something that the legislature knows is going to have a problem. So to give you an idea how much $374 million is, the legislature saved about $239 million this year. So with the savings, that's not enough money to cover Medicaid expansion. So that gives you an idea of what we're dealing with and why it needs to be stopped.
I'm going to ask you one last question,
Yes.
then we'll let you go. We had a budget surplus this year.
Yes.
We had a budget surplus last year.
Yes.
We had the largest tax increase in Oklahoma history
Yes.
last year. Would you agree that if there's a budget surplus, that money needs to go back to the citizens because we're being overtaxed?
I think so. And you bring up an important point, Rhonda. Remind your friends from 2015 to 2018, annual taxes and revenue. So decisions that were passed by the legislature, Senator Dom did not vote for them. They increased taxes and the revenue burden on Oklahomans by $1.1 billion annually. That's just what was proactively passed by the legislature to raise your taxes, raise fees. That's not including the natural growth in the economy. So you're exactly right. The next time there's surplus revenue, where it needs to go is tax relief for Oklahomans and tax reform, moving to a fairer system. So part of what you're seeing going on is a number of special interest groups. They're getting very concerned about this current governor because he's repeatedly saying he's a governor for all 4 million Oklahomans. That's part of the reason why he's engaging the way he is on the compacts. They're upset. The tribes are upset that the governor didn't do what previous governors did, which was go out to eat with them when the public couldn't see, and then cut a sweetheart deal for the tribes, and then come out and say, hey, we're all in agreement. The governor recognizes the tribes have a monopoly. Yep. So a monopoly is worth more than 6%. Also, so this is a fascinating stat about the gaming compacts and why we all need to support the governor. This will blow your mind. Oklahoma has the third largest amount of casinos across the country. The only bigger states than Oklahoma are California, with 20 million plus people, and Nevada. They've got this little bitty place called Las Vegas. But here's what will blow your mind. There is only one state where gambling is a larger share of its economy than Oklahoma's, and that is Nevada. That's it. Gambling in Oklahoma is now the 8th largest industry, which is a very loose use of the term. and it represents $5 billion a year that we're not allowed to audit or go investigate. So that's just taking the tribe's word for it, that it's just $5 billion a year. The governor saying, just like all of us are subject to audits, all of us as taxpayers, we're subject to the tax commission saying, you know what, we don't believe that you're telling us all your income, so here, prove it to us. The governor merely thinks, hey, the casino industry should have to do the same thing too. Also, don't fall into the trap, you know, the tribes want to make this about them being tribes. It's not about the tribes, it's about the casino industry. They just happen to have a monopoly. So we're talking in terms of big casinos because they are. Think about this. WinStar Casino is the world's largest casino. It's in southern Oklahoma. It pays no property taxes. It pays no corporate income taxes. It pays no sales taxes. It pays a 6% exclusivity fee on half of its revenue at a number that they report to the state where they just say, trust us. Fortunately, Governor Stitt thinks that's not a fair playing field for the rest of Oklahomans, and he's working to do something about it. So
That's awesome. Well, introduce your staff.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. So this is part of the next generation of America that should give you hope. I don't give you hope. The three of them should give you hope. Caitlin Finley does healthcare policy for Oklahoma, or for OCPA. You're going to see her a lot more than you'll see me. Alexander Miller just joined us. First day was Wednesday, right? He's going to be helping us with our investors, donor development, and then Hallie Milner doing some similar work, and then also over outreach. So
That's awesome. You guys do an amazing.
hardcore conservatives that give us hope for the future.
Yes.
So we had to stop for a while. Sorry. We had to stop for a while because of rain, but we did bring a lot of handouts.
Yes.
If we want to hand those, pass them out.
The
to
handouts I
everyone.
promised.
Perfect. This is gonna
They
be
got
some
hit by the
talking
monsoons
points.
that I was a little
know.
bit in front of.
I know. Well, thank you guys for coming out, and thank you, Jonathan. We always appreciate you.
No, thank
and
you guys. I
whatever
appreciate
we
it.
can do to help you out, we're here for you. So, thank you.